Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping headfirst into the wild, treacherous, and absolutely epic story of the Delhi Sultanate. We're talking 320 years, 5 different dynasties, and a whole lot of drama, all revolving around one singular obsession. And that's really the big question that hangs over this entire era, isn't it? For centuries, you had all these major powers, from Mongol warlords all the way to the Mughals, and they were all laser-focused on capturing this one specific place. So why? What was so special about this one city? That city, of course, was Delhi. And look, it wasn't just a capital city. It was the ultimate prize. It was the symbol of absolute power over the entire Indian subcontinent. If you could sit on the throne of Delhi, well, you were the master of an empire. Okay, so let's get into it. To really wrap our heads around this obsession, we first need to meet the key players. Over the course of 3 centuries, 5 totally distinct dynasties rose up and then crashed and burned, all of them fighting for control of this one single prize. So think of this as our roadmap. We kick things off with the Mamluks, also known as the Slave Dynasty. And yes, you heard that right. Then get ready for the ambitious and pretty brutal Khiljis, followed by the brilliant but completely baffling Tughlaqs. The story then starts to wind down with the fading power of the Sayyids and finally, the fatal arrogance of the Lodis. Let's dive in. Right, so our story starts in probably the most unconventional way you can imagine. See, the first Sultan of Delhi wasn't born a prince. He wasn't the heir to some great throne. He was a slave who clawed his way up to become a king. And that brings us to the Mamluk dynasty. The word Mamluk itself literally means owned. Its founder, Qutb-ud-Din Aibak, wasn't born to rule. Nope. He was a slave who became the most trusted general of the conqueror Muhammad Ghori. And as a reward for his insane loyalty, Ghori gave him the ultimate prize, the throne of Delhi itself. Now, Aibak was known for being unbelievably generous. They called him Lakbaksh, or giver of hundreds of thousands. He left a huge mark on Delhi's skyline, starting the construction of the world-famous Qutub Minar. But his reign was shockingly short. In a really bizarre accident, after just 4 years on the throne, he fell from his horse during a game of polo and died. Just like that. After Aibak, the dynasty really swung between 2 extremes. On one hand, you had a guy like Iltutmish, the consolidator. He was all about building institutions and creating stability. He even held off Genghis Khan. But then came Balban, the tyrant. This guy saw himself as God's shadow on earth. He tore down the very council Iltutmish created and ruled through pure fear and a massive network of spies. It's a perfect example of order versus absolute control. Well, the Mamluks eventually crumbled, and a new dynasty seized power. And this one, it wasn't defined by stability, but by pure, ruthless ambition, terror, and relentless expansion. Welcome to the age of the Khiljis. In just 30 years, they pushed the borders of the Sultanate further than anyone ever had before, and they did it using conquest and plunder as their main tools of government. And at the heart of this dynasty was the infamous Alauddin Khilji, a man of, let's just say, brutal contradictions. He literally murdered his own father-in-law to get the throne. His military genius saved India from the Mongols again and again, but he funded his entire empire by just relentlessly looting other kingdoms. His general even captured the legendary Koh-i-Noor diamond. But here's the twist. This brutal conqueror was also a micromanager, imposing strict price controls on everything. His reign was basically a masterclass in using terror and shrewd economics to build an empire on a scale nobody had ever seen. So after the Khilji's fiery reign finally burned out, the longest ruling dynasty of all took the throne, the Tughlaqs, and they were led by one of the most brilliant and frankly baffling rulers in all of history. His name was Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Now this guy was a visionary scholar, fluent in multiple languages, a genius in math and philosophy. The problem was, his visionary ideas were so badly executed that they led to absolute disaster. It earned him the nickname, the wisest fool. So let's just look at 2 of his most infamous blunders. First, he got scared of Mongol attacks, so he decided to move the capital. He forced the entire population of Delhi to march hundreds of kilometers south. The journey was a catastrophe. Thousands died. And then, realizing his old capital was now totally defenseless, he made everyone march all the way back. His second great idea? He introduced a new currency made of cheap metal, but he had no way to stop people from making fakes. So naturally, every home became a mini-mint. The result? Total economic collapse. Visionary ideas, catastrophic execution. This quote, supposedly his last words, just captures the tragic irony of his rule perfectly. The Sultan is free from his people, and the people from their Sultan. What a sad epitaph for the huge disconnect between his grand plans and the immense suffering they caused. So his successor, Firoz Shah Tughlaq, pretty much spent his entire reign just trying to clean up the mess. Forget radical experiments, he focused completely on healing the empire. He became a builder, establishing new cities, hospitals that gave free treatment, and even entire departments to support the poor. It was a clear attempt to bring back some stability after years of total chaos. But you guessed it, this period of healing didn't last. After the Tughlaqs, the Sultanate's power began to fracture. The empire grew weak, it became decentralized, and worst of all, fatally vulnerable. And in 1398, that vulnerability was brutally exposed. The Turco-Mongol conqueror Timur, you might know him as Tamerlane, smashed his way into a leaderless Delhi. And this number you see on your screen, 200,000, that's the estimated number of people his army massacred in just 5 days. The city was left in absolute ruins. You know, what followed were really the Sultanate's last gasps. First, you had the Said dynasty, which was just a shadow of what came before. I mean, their power was so small they barely controlled the land 40 kilometers outside of Delhi. Then came the Lodis, the first Afghan dynasty to rule. And while they had some successes, like founding the city of Agra, the final sultan, Ibrahim Lodi, was defined by his own arrogance. His cruelty pushed his most powerful nobles to their breaking point, setting the stage for the final betrayal. And this is how it all ended, not with some grand foreign invasion, but with an invitation. Ibrahim Lodi's own governor and his uncle got so fed up with his tyranny that they committed the ultimate betrayal. They sent a message to a ruler over in Kabul named Babur, asking him to please invade India and get their own sultan off the throne. Babur accepted the invitation. And just like that, 320 years of the Delhi Sultanate came to a violent end. Which, of course, brings us all the way back to our original question. After all of that bloodshed, all that betrayal, why was everyone still so obsessed with Delhi? Well, the answer really boils down to a powerful mix of three things. First, Delhi was a massive commercial hub, a crossroads for trade that made it one of the richest cities in the world. Second, it housed the national mint. If you control Delhi, you control the creation of money itself. And third, it was the perfect strategic command center, a central point from which a ruler could project power across the massive plains of India. So, at the end of the day, the answer is this. Delhi was never just a city. It was the financial, the military, and the symbolic heart of the empire. To hold Delhi was to hold the keys to the wealth, the armies, and the very idea of power across the entire subcontinent. The defeat of Ibrahim Lodi in 1526 was the final nail in the coffin for the Sultanate. But it was not the end of Delhi's story. In fact, it was the dawn of a new, even more powerful empire, founded by the very man who was invited to invade, Babur. And that leaves us with a brand new question. Who were the Mughals?